Hi, I'm Jessica, and I'm here to talk about the relationship between red meat consumption and climate change. So before I state my claim of fact, I would just like to remind everyone why climate change is important, and the Earth is getting warmer. So some consequences of a warmer Earth are that higher temperature means it's easier for insects, such as disease-carrying mosquitoes and invasive species, to thrive. Also, warmer temperatures make the air and the water warmer, and that creates stronger storms such as hurricanes and typhoons. And lastly, that rising temperature change make it harder for niche species to survive. So finally, I'm going to state my claim of fact, which is reducing red meat consumption would significantly lessen current accelerated climate change. My first supporting claim is that raising red meat releases copious amounts of methane, which is a greenhouse gas. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, for every 1 pound of meat produced, cows release about 110 pounds of methane, compared to only 5 pounds released from a chicken. Methane is released from animals through belching and flatulence, and another source of methane from them is from their manure. What makes methane one of the worst greenhouse gases is that it traps about 23 times more heat than carbon dioxide does. So to put that in perspective, the amount of gas that one cow releases in a year, a single year, is equivalent to burning 7,600 miles of fuel in a car. So my second claim is that cattle raising causes deforestation. About 26% of the planet's ice-free land is used for animal grazing. National Geographic states that the biggest driver of deforestation is agriculture. And it's only going to get worse. By the year 2050, consumption of dairy and meat is expected to rise about 76%. And this is because the shift of underdeveloped countries to developed countries is going to cause more meat consumption and population rising. So to make room for the grazing, you have to cut down trees. And with less trees, they can't absorb as much carbon dioxide, which is then put back into the atmosphere. So now we know two things. We know that 1, cows emit methane, and 2, that deforestation increases carbon dioxide. So this is leading up to my final supporting claim that greenhouse gases cause climate change. The release of greenhouse gases is completely normal. It was happening before humans were around. It occurs naturally from volcano fumes and even just breathing. But this is excessive and consistent release, and so that it's anthropogenic, meaning that it originates from human activity. This is also creating a vicious cycle because higher temperatures cause underground gases that are underground or that are encased in ice to be released. My conclusion is that reducing red meat consumption is a low risk and high reward action that reduces greenhouse gases. I'm not saying to give up red meat or become a vegetarian or vegan, but just be mindful of how much you're eating. Other activities in your daily life may be hard to reduce, such as you can't stop how far you need to drive or use electricity, or be more conscious of how much waste you produce, but it's easier to just swap out like maybe one meal for a veggie meal. So thank you, everyone.
All right, let's start with some of the good stuff. The proposition's very clear. In the body of the speech, it's organized and signposted, so it's pretty easy to follow. You have explanations on most of the points that are easy for us to understand. I think you seem to understand the argument yourself, so that enhances your credibility quite a bit. And I think you generally talk to the audience, so that builds some credibility as well. Some places where there are some problems, there's no preview in the beginning of the speech, so I'm not exactly sure how your argument's going to develop. And listening benefits from having reinforcement, and you need to have a little bit more reinforcement, especially at the beginning of the speech. There's not really much of a summary. I did like the concluding explanation that you have, but you want to remind us of what the main points were in the body of the speech as well. You have 2 more minutes that you could use, and I can see immediately what it is that you need. You need some more data on your individual points. You kind of rest on the notion of a single piece of information on each of these points, and then there's a lot of explanation about all those things, but there are several places where you make assertions that I think need some data. For example, the stuff about cutting trees is the primary way in which we create grazing land. I didn't hear any information on that. That we have fewer trees now as a result of that. I didn't hear any information on that. I heard the stuff about what percentage of the grazing land comes from, I guess, areas that have been clear cut, but I don't know that those trees have been removed or that we have fewer trees as a consequence, because stuff gets replanted all the time. So we need some data that gives us some comparative information. The third point, basically is a generic argument about climate change, suggesting that it is contributed to by a variety of gases. I'm not sure that anybody disputes that there's an impact on that. There's a dispute about how significant it is and what degree is controllable, and part of your argument is really about what degree is controllable as well. And I couldn't tell you, having listened to your speech, how much we how much would we reduce the threat if we did what you said, just ate a vegetable meal once a week, or got rid of the red meat twice a week, or whatever the number is that you think is appropriate. What measurable impact would there be on this harm? I don't have any data on that. So I got a very basic explanation of the issue, a little bit of information on each point, but not the kind of information that would be sufficient to be convincing to anybody who has substantial reservations on these points. And some of it, like I said, you did give us a source citation on. Some of it was not. For example, the claim that methane traps 23 times as much CO2. I'm going, what source is that? Is that the same the UN source that you were citing earlier? Is it a different source? I don't know. It just seems to be an accepted premise of your argument without any proof on it. And there is some other information that's similar to that. So that's the thing that I think is the place where you need to do more, is add more content in terms of evidence to your position. All right. Thank you.